AI scribes. Clinicians love them, but when it comes to productivity, the math just ain't mathin'. Triadic care, which we talked to David Frail-Navarro about on last week's show. Today, we've got the rundown on a new kind of therapeutic triangle: patient, psychologist, and chatbot. New Zealand government, are they actually ready to invest in digital health again? We'll find out more. The next user interface might be your cerebral cortex. We're going to break down brain user interfaces. And finally, TikTok. It's the new waiting room and it's open 24/7. All of this and more on today's jam-packed show. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Pulse, your podcast delving into all things health, innovation, digital and data. Proudly brought to you by Pulse IT News. This is our Hot Topics show and I'm your host, Louise Schaper.
And I'm your other host, George Margellis.
George, it's December. Are you flat out, going to cocktail parties, celebrating the Christmas season, or what have you been up to?
Look, it's actually been fairly quiet the last fortnight. A couple of Christmas celebrations where we've caught up with some friends and families for Christmas drinks. But as far from a health technology perspective, after a fairly busy year and having 3 international trips in 2 months before this, I'm glad to be actually sitting at home and talking about things other than health technology. But of course, every discussion seems to always trigger discussion about AI. So we keep on talking about AI, whether it's healthcare or anything else. And I do note the Australian government recently launched its AI strategy. So it's been a quiet but AI-influenced fortnight. How about yourself?
Yes, let me see. At a personal level, I did get sucked into buying more stuff on Black Friday than I think I ever have before. And that's not usually me, but I feel okay about it because while I did give the credit card a good working out, I didn't have to leave home once. That was very convenient. And I'm done with my Christmas present shopping. It's all done, and also got myself a couple of Christmas presents too. So that's been fun.
I'm sure they're very well-deserved Christmas presents, and I'm sure the Australian economy will thank you for it. You may even get a thank you letter from Jim Chalmers.
Yeah. And this week, by the time this goes to air, it would have already happened. But the Seeker Lab program that I run with Medical Angels and my friends there, where we teach clinicians how to be entrepreneurs and to think entrepreneurially, we've got our celebration with a pitch night as well. So we've got some companies that are not even companies yet, just people with fabulous ideas, as well as early stage companies pitching for the prize. And last I checked, we've got 90 odd people registered. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be lots of fun and a good celebration to end the year on for all those entrepreneurs and industry people.
That's an in-person event down in Melbourne?
It is, yeah.
I wish I was there. It sounds like a great fun.
I know. We'll have to organise something next year, George, because we always do these end-of-year things with Seeker. So next year, I think we'll have to organise something in advance and see if we can get you down to Melbourne for it. And to be honest, we only started promoting it a couple of weeks ago. So we're like, we might have left it a bit late because of the Christmas season. But we're going to sell out. We'll be standing room only. So that's going to be fun. All right, shall we get to our hot topics, George?
Let's go with it.
Our first story today dives into one of healthcare's hottest investment spaces, AI medical scribes, where the disconnect between the hype and the evidence is real. Now, according to a new PitchBook analysis, AI scribe companies have raised over $4.8 billion, this is US, since 2019, with $1.6 billion US raised just in 2025 alone. 4 companies have even reached billion-dollar valuations. The report estimates the addressable market at over $5 billion annually in the US alone. Fair to say, there is a lot of money going into these tools. But here is where it gets interesting. A new systematic review published in the New England Journal of Medicine AI looked at the actual evidence for these tools. The review found that while many AI scribes sell productivity gains as a key reason that you should use them, the actual time savings were minimal, almost non-existent at a statistical level. But doctors love these tools. The clinicians, they give them rave reviews. They consistently report the technology helps alleviate burnout. And the calls for transparency are also getting louder. So recently, Professor Enrico Quera and other experts are demanding that AI scribe vendors show us your work, lift the hood on how these algorithms actually function, what they're optimizing for, and like what the trade-offs they're making. George, we've got billions of dollars flowing into a technology that doctors love, but that may not actually be saving time or necessarily improving care quality. This is a paradox. What do you think's going on here?
I think it can fair to say that 2025 has definitely been the year of the AI scribe. We've seen press, we've seen their huge presence at many of our trade events, and we've seen these amazing valuations. Heidi Health, the Australian company, is valued now at over $500 million US. But then you look at the US, Abridge, the US player, is valued at $5.3 billion. That's a hell of a lot of money.
That doesn't seem real, surely.
And this is the challenge, because all this is based on their fundraising. None of them have been gone public or actually sold into the market. So as far as we know, you can make up any number you want and call it your valuation. But the problem, of course, is the effect that has on the rest of the market, because, again, money's flowing into those companies that could well be flowing into other parts of it. They've pretty much been basing themselves on how they're going to save their customers money. So yeah, you buy this system, it makes your system more productive, it streamlines process. But the reality is the New England Journal of Medicine, which is a highly respected publication, suggests that the productivity gains aren't that big. We're talking a couple of minutes a day in some cases. And then we're starting to see other publications which are claiming that the actual accuracy of the data is not that great either. Now, they do claim to make doctors happier. That's a good thing. Happy doctor is a good doctor, I guess.
And every clinician I know that uses a scribe loves it. If anything, they just want it to do more.
Yeah. And this is the key point, of course, is when we talk to US doctors, they have a fairly onerous task around documentation. So they're pretty sad. So it makes them happier. Interesting. I've had mixed discussions here in Australia. So some of them love it. And then I was actually with a couple of people over the weekend who sort of said, oh, yeah, it was fun in the beginning, but then it's lost its luster. And then, of course, they start worrying because once the medical defense organizations put out a newsletter saying, you are liable for what this AI produces, and if it makes a mistake, you're the one going to jail, that sort of takes away some of the gloss. So we're going through that phase. And the other thing, of course, is that, again, Enrico is a great example. People want to understand what their tools do. When they were purely transcription tools, when they took what I said and copied it into a note, that was fairly low risk. When they started to take what I said and summarize it, that adds a level of risks, but it's still below the threshold for TGA. But as we now start to look at how they work as part of agentic workflows, and if we have totally autonomous agentic workflows, a misquoted piece of information in an AI scribe may end up recommending a dangerous prescription on the end. And unless you can know where in that chain of data everything's gone wrong, the responsibility becomes a big issue. And the regulatory authorities are going to look at that. So that's going to basically require them to actually have a new level of regulation around them, which, one, adds to their expenses in producing the systems, and B, limits their marketing capacity, because once you're a regulated medical device, you can't go around banging the drum that's going to save the world. And we know our good friend down in Tasmania, John Lambert's been banging the drum about the risk, and there are risks associated. Everyone needs to take those into account.
And especially because of the black box thing. So, if I was an AI scribe company, I would be like, okay, look at all my peer review research results, not just pilots. Like, these are real studies. And then I'd also be publishing error and hallucination rates, that order pool trails, because that would make you stand out in the market, because most of them aren't doing that.
And it's interesting because when you have things like Doximity and Open Evidence in the United States saying they're using their own scribe tools and they're based on a much more controlled LLM. Again, what happens behind the curtain is complicated. And then we saw some stuff that came out recently that suggested that without access to the clinical information in the EMR, the accuracy is significantly decreased. But once an LLM accesses a person's EMR data, which includes some fairly highly sensitive data, how do you control the two-way flow of that information? There's still a lot of questions to be raised. And as far as the valuations go, first float will demonstrate whether the valuations are as good as they claim to be. But hopefully we don't see people losing money and time and energy in the process.
Yeah, the evaluation, it has to be more than just a simple transcript that summarizes. Even though that seemed game-changing earlier this year, I think already it's just becoming a commodity. You mentioned agentic workflows. If then you can actually take that information and plug it into agentic workflows, because I think that's where you would get the real productivity gains there. So whether it's filling out forms for various government departments that might be paying, could be DVA, Veterans Affairs, workers' compensation claims, like a lot of the reasons people go in to see primary care, you can automate some of that stuff, and then the clinician just has to check, because we always need that human in the loop. Then I could imagine you'd have real productivity gains. It'll be interesting to see where the research goes in this space over the next couple of years, because it's just getting rolled out everywhere.
To the credit of the Australian companies that I've dealt with in the last year or so, they have been evidence-based and they've worked in that space, and they've brought in some very influential and smart people to help them on that journey. So don't by any way think, I think this is a bad thing. I think AI scribes have a real important role, but we need to understand that we're in a high-risk environment and we need to put checks and balances in place.
Yeah, agreed. All right. It won't be the last time. I was about to say that we discuss AI scribes on Pulse. It's not even going to be the last time in today's show, George. So let's get on with the next hot topic.
Absolutely.
George, we've talked before about the use of Gen AI tools in the mental health space. We're revisiting this topic again today because of a confluence of articles that have just come out. We've got the MIT Technology Review reporting about a psychologist secretly using ChatGPT during a psych appointment. And I can't believe I've been in this field long enough, but this still shocked me. So during an online therapy session, the therapist accidentally shared his screen with the patient. And what the patient saw was his therapist typing everything this guy was saying into ChatGPT in real time. And then the therapist was reading back the AI responses as therapeutic guidance. I was completely shocked by that. But anyway, so that happened. And then we've got the New York Times and look, a lot of outlets reporting on people uploading their medical records into ChatGPT and using ChatGPT as a therapist, which seems like a great deal, $20 a month instead of hundreds of dollars per session with a human psychologist. And then finally, something else that really caught my eye in this theme, an interesting report in Fortune on a founder who was building a product and company for AI mental health services, an app. He actually decided to shut it all down because of patient safety concerns, saying that general purpose chatbots are not safe for people with serious mental health issues or in crisis. And he concluded the risks outweighed the benefits, and he wound up his own company, which is a very rare safety first decision. George, can AI-mediated care ever be truly therapeutic?
Look, it's a good question. And this has been an ongoing discussion around digital mental health tools for quite a while. Lots of mental health have been in the press. And of course, the one thing that's triggered a lot of discussion has been the much bandied case of the 16-year-old boy in California whose parents allege ChatGPT was used as his suicide coach, which is a heartbreaking story from a family perspective and a misuse of technology. And interesting, OpenAI have openly defended that the technology was misused and the person ignored warnings or whatever. But the reality is people in that sort of volatile state probably aren't in the right place of mind to respond to those guardrails. Nevertheless, there seems to be a huge uptake. We hear many stories of people developing therapeutic relationships with their ChatGPT tools and other tools. That what I think that does reflect is how hard it is to get those services in the community today. So the fact that people have to go to ChatGPT, or ChatGPT has become a very generic term for online chatbots nowadays. We're not saying that OpenAI is the one and only one. They're obviously, and every week there's another dozen pop up. But the reality is that the lack of access to mental health support in this country, in the United States, around the world is a major issue. And if a tool comes along which can help alleviate some of those issues, then I think it has a place. But again, this is where guardrails come in. How do you make sure that it's used for those sort of low acuity cases that can be managed in this space and not for the high acuity cases? And I have to admit, I found mental health one of the hardest parts of my medical career, learning how to differentiate the hard stuff from the easy stuff. And we've even seen that this is part of the challenge we have with our public mental health state, in that the hard stuff goes into the public system and the easy stuff goes into the private system with psychologists and psychiatrists. So we have that inequity that those who need the most help have the least access to it. So that's part of it. One interesting thing, of course, is one thing that obviously therapists do need is training on how to use Zoom and Teams more effectively so that they don't
Oh my
share the
God.
wrong screen.
I was horrified.
So that may be a call for digital literacy of our therapists.
I'd be finding a new therapist. I'd be like, hang on, what am I paying you for? Like, I might as well just go to ChatGPT myself.
And I do note in that article that when she did highlight the issue with her therapist, he had to explain it away and charged her for that visit as well. So it was a thing. My biggest concern, and it reflects back on the previous discussion as well, is the use of generic LLMs for use in these complex situations. And this is where, back to Enrico's discussion, a sovereign AI tool that is based on high quality data so that we can make sure that at least the basis of the tool is strong. So that should lead to less hallucination, that it should lead to less bad outcomes, but ongoing evaluation in real time. That's really important. And this requires us to have a transparency. The story about the guy who basically shut down his own company after investing a lot of time and money into it because he considered it to be unsafe, I think, reflects well on the startup community, that someone would move fast and break things, but realizing that his potential for harm is a great thing. But that's also quite a damning statement about the fact that we don't know what we don't know in this space, and we need to often step warily to make sure we don't effectively kill people. That's what we can do.
That's right. The other thing, if you take one thing away, a ChatGPT, everybody, it is not HIPAA compliant. Now, while HIPAA is a US legislation, it is very stringent. So basically, it's all about protecting patient privacy, and you need it if you're a clinician gathering information. You need it if you're a company gathering information, let alone sharing it. These rules do not apply to ChatGPT. So I would think that psychologists, for instance, putting information into ChatGPT would be at risk of losing their professional license. At least here in Australia, they would anyway, because it's a complete breach of patient privacy, let alone trust.
And again, because we don't know what happens in the background, who knows if George Margellis's information is uploaded and someone types in a similar problem, they're going, like George Margellis, you also have blah, blah. That would be quite an embarrassing situation.
That's right.
Unless it also added, but if you listen to him on the Pulse podcast, you may learn something more about this condition.
That's it. We need to program ChatGPT to promote the pod. I like it. We are going over to New Zealand, across the ditch. Now, 2024, it did not end on a banger for the digital health sector in New Zealand. Budget cuts were severe, and HERA, their big, ambitious digital modernisation program, was effectively canned. Well, the New Zealand government seems determined to put that past behind them. It's been another 12 months, and so now they have come out with a 10-year plan for digital health, announced by Health Minister Simeon Brown at HINZ's Digital Health Week. Pulse IT journalist Rish Lyon was at the announcement and covered the details in Pulse IT. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. So New Zealand have now a 10-year health digital investment plan, a new centre for digital modernisation of health to actually get it done, and they've also established something called HealthX to accelerate innovation and the use of AI. The announcements included plans for a single electronic medical record across the whole health sector, AI scribes in emergency departments. See, I told you we should want scribes again, and remote patient monitoring. Now, the case for change is blunt. 65% of hospitals still use paper notes. Critical information, of course, doesn't flow between GPs and hospitals. And Health New Zealand is wrangling 6,000 plus digital systems. That's roughly one system for every 15 staff. Now, George, this is probably a watch this space in terms of its significance, because I did note that there wasn't any accompanying funding announcement. But still, the health minister rocks up to the digital health event of the year with, hey, these are the cool things we're going to do over a 10-year time frame. Our sector is watching. What do you think?
So, Louise, have you seen the movie Shrek?
Yes.
Yes. So there's a scene in that movie where Donkey, which is voiced by Eddie Murphy, and Shrek are trying to get into the castle where Princess Fiona's been held. And they go through this tumultuous ride through fire and through water and through whatever. And when they get to the other end, Donkey lands and he goes, let's do that again. New Zealand reminds me of Donkey, because here they are 2 years after their last big digital health transformation journey where they poached some of our best and greatest people here in health. They say, let's do that again. And HINZ conferences in New Zealand are a big deal. They get a lot of people there. And this was the health minister. This wasn't a assistant to the deputy secretary type person announcing this. And yeah, it's a nice looking plan. I had a look at the plan. It's very well structured. It talks about the required investment. I do have some concern. I mean, their number one concern is an EMR. Their number 10 concern is primary care. I would have probably said a bit better. But the reality is that there's a lot of things that need to be invested in. And as you pointed out, no one's actually published a number. And I do know they have an election coming up next year. So whether they publish that number before next year. But they'd also talk about these very vague time horizons. So it talks about a 10-year plan, which by my calculations is at least 3 terms of government, which is always challenging. As I've said in the past, I'm not a big fan of publications and they're not followed by an action item. And this is where I have to give a call out to the work of the aged care group within the Department of Health and Aged Care at that time as they were, but now with adding disability. Josh Molden last year published what was then the digital and data strategy for aged care, but they also published a separate report on the action plan for aged care. So we actually had a strategy and an action plan. And I think that combination really made a difference. And my major concern here is that if history is anything to be to learn from, I'm worried our friends over on the other side of the Tasman may try to poach some of our people over here who are doing some good work. So the one thing I do ask, this is for the Australian government to quarantine our people who are doing a great job to make sure they don't get taken over to the other side of the Tasman. But the reality is they need to go beyond just publishing a document. They need to develop an action plan. And there may be an opportunity for Australia and New Zealand to collaborate on this. The reality is they're a relatively small nation. Money is a challenge worldwide. And we're now starting to see that happen around the world, that the consequences of the COVID lockdown on people, on countries' net assets is a challenge. I think it's great that they've got the publication. They need to follow through with an action plan, not steal our people, develop their own people, develop a deliverable. This question about going to a market for an EMR, we've seen that happen in a number of countries and a number of states here in Australia recently. And whether New Zealand goes through the same process and ends up with a well-known solution from around the world, or whether they need to look at developing something locally. There's lots to happen in that space.
Yeah, I think one thing we could say for sure is this is all about tender watch. So I think all the vendors listening that will hear, okay, there's an announcement. That means they'll probably be doing some requests for quotations, tenders, while they work out what sort of money they can put behind these systems. And like you said, if they're going into an election next year, I imagine there'll be some budget announcements for the population about, oh, this is what we're going to do if you re-elect us. We will have to just stay tuned, as Rish Lyon does over there in New Zealand, reporting for Pulse IT, and just watch this space.
Having worked in the vendor space, putting out tenders that don't end up with a product being sold is something that happens. We've seen a lot of that in Australia. One of my very first tasks when I first joined a large vendor back in 2005 was to go over to WA and discuss with them their imminent EMR rollout. That was 2005. In 2025, the last time I was over there, they were talking about their imminent EMR rollout.
There are long lead times, let's say, in healthcare.
Absolutely, yeah. So whether you can go fast and break things in healthcare, we've had that discussion. Sometimes if you go so slow, when you start getting described as the turtle of digital health, that may not be the way you want to be known as.
No. Okay. I didn't get to New Zealand for the HINZ conference, but there were lots of Aussies there. And I heard there was generally good vibes. It was a really positive event. So it would have been nice to have the health minister there to lend his support for the digital health sector that really got a kick in the guts in 2024. So let's hope 2026 is better for them all. All right, well, time for a quick break, but we will be back very soon with more hot topics. All right, George, now it is that time of the year where everyone loves a top 10 list. MIT Technology Review has published their breakthrough technologies list of the top 10 technologies they expect to affect our world in a big way for decades to come. Among the picks, generative AI search, small language models, as opposed to large ones, and general purpose robots. There's also a new HIV prevention drug, which you take just twice a year that could actually help end AIDS, and stem cell therapies now showing genuine promise in curing diseases like type 1 diabetes and epilepsy. So there was lots of healthcare innovation in their list of the top 10. But MIT Review do something really interesting. They ask readers what technologies didn't make it into their list that should have been there. And the most popular choice gets ranked number 11 this year by a complete landslide with like over 3,000 votes. The populace, they chose the brain-computer interface. So these are devices that literally connect neurons to computers, allowing people with like paralysis to control a cursor, move robotic limbs, or even speak via thought. Now, only about 71 people in the entire world have ever lived with an implanted brain-computer interface, where researchers, they tend to find like a single volunteer, they install an implant of some description, and then they run studies for months or even years. Now, about 25 clinical trials are underway, led by two US companies, Neuralink and Synchron, and the other one is a Chinese company called Neurical Neuroscience. Now, all of those three companies are racing to bring the first implantable BCI to market. Researchers are calling it the translation era, moving from proof of concept to practical therapy. So, George, we've spent time in this episode already talking about AI and digital health technologies that are being deployed at scale, even though they have mixed evidence or create new problems. Brain-computer interfaces are the opposite. So we're talking a tiny scale, not just in the device, but in the size of the research. So, 71 people on the planet. So tiny scale, decades of research, the possibility of being genuinely transformative for people who have them, but there's still not a product here or anything really useful for people. So what does it tell us that readers voted this as the breakthrough technology that they're most excited about?
Brain-computer interfaces are really cool technologies. They really deserve to be up there in the MIT Breakthrough Technologies list. But we also need to have a dose of reality built into it. Now, you're not old enough to remember, Louise, but back in the 70s, there was a TV show called The $6 Million Man, the Bionic Man, which included these brain interfaces. So the vision of what can happen with these sort of technologies is great. And we've seen movies like The Matrix and Brainstorm and many others, but we need to take it back to the reality. And as you said, 71 people out of 7 billion people in the world have actually had these things attached to them. And if you look at the publicity of it, I'm pretty sure Elon Musk and his Neuralink company probably control most of the publicity around that. There are some great advances. The fact that we can use these technologies to today control a cursor, that in itself is a benefit to someone who previously was in total lockdown and could not actually communicate in any way. And the need to improve the research in that domain is important. We need to understand, of course, that we are dealing with a really complex organism. The human organism itself is complex enough. The brain is another level of complexity. And
there's still so much we don't know about, really.
Yeah, exactly. So putting wires into people's brains and hoping for the best is a nice concept, but we need to better understand. So going back to that requirement for core research, which is an area which has been decimated over the last year, especially in the United States, but around the world, we need to have more core research about understanding the brain. I remember when I was back at uni, there was a professor, George Paxinos, who had made the first map of the rat brain. The Atlas of the Rat Brain was actually the most cited publication for 2 decades because it just provided a level of access to information that wasn't available anywhere else. So understanding how the brain works is important. Improving research about how we use tools like brain-computer interfaces is important. Whether we want them in the hands of the potential James Bond type villains, that's not a discussion.
But it's a really real discussion, though. I know it's something we could laugh about, but that's it. Like in previous generations, cutting-edge technologies were funded pretty exclusively by government, even if they were doing it in collaboration with private enterprise. Whereas now, screw that. Like it's just billionaires, trillionaires, maybe. It's all private investment. And this is about producing a company and making money rather than just doing something good. So it is a real concern.
And I've seen enough James Bond movies where the evil billionaire's idea of what is the right thing for the world to do is not necessarily correlates with all of us. And I've also seen, unfortunately, many young and old people with spinal injuries. And if we can do something that makes their life better, because if you look at a 22-year-old with a C1, C2 fracture, they literally have a working brain and totally non-working body, and how you can use these tools to do that. If we can do it without drilling electrodes into the brain, I'm sure there's a lot of work being done to try and find new ways of doing it. I think we need to support the research. I think we need to, again, as with all things, make sure we have some guardrails around it. But also, this is where governments need to invest, because these are benefits for everyone. And whilst private organizations doing the research, and we've seen this in space technology now, we see it in these sort of technologies, they obviously have a role. We need to make sure that work reflects back to the general population as well. We keep on talking about equity. Well, millionaires are not known necessarily for their equitable mindset. But then again, people like Bill Gates and the guy who just retired, the 95-year-old
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett, that's it. there is people out who are, government can't forsake its responsibility for research. I think that's really important. And let's be honest, in Australia, we saw last week significant cut in the funding for our CSIRO and lots of people losing their jobs there as well. So, yeah, we need to make sure that research is well funded, because if it's not, then the consequences down the track can be fairly bad.
Yeah. And so let's fast forward into the future, and this technology is a real thing. Would you ever consider becoming an augmented human?
Yeah, if the technology demonstrated value, so if it managed something that I currently can't do, allow me to do it. Look, and a classic example, the ultimate augmentation that everyone over the age of 45 uses today is a pair of glasses. So we use tools to augment our capabilities. Yeah. Like I said, I'd probably think twice about drilling a hole in my head, but if it was something which just sat in the back of my baseball cap and connected to my brain, yeah, probably would consider it.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would. I'm interested in some of the technologies that are like more like a Black Mirror episode. If I could wear a contact lens that would take photographs where I just had to press my fingers together or something to do it, that would be awesome. What else would I want? Oh, if I could get like a chip in my hand so I don't have to worry about charging anything, that I could have stored my credit card details so I could swipe. Like, I don't know, there's all sorts of things. We were talking about the Terminator 2 episodes ago. So I actually watched the most recent Terminator film, which I hadn't seen in years, the one where Linda Hamilton's character comes back and she's 60s or 70s or something. And there's a female Terminator, but she's actually not a Terminator. She's a human, but she's an augmented human. And so she's like a super fighter, super soldier, but her body is full of wires and chips and things like that. I was like, oh, that would be really cool. I don't think that will happen in my lifetime, though.
That contact lens or even a pair of glasses, because again, walking into a room with 50 people who I know, but their name is at the tip of my tongue, having that augmentation alone would be...
Yes. How good would that be? So you've the visuals, so you know the person and something will remind you that this is how you know them or what their name is. Yeah, that'd be useful. That would be helpful for dementia patients as well, not just those of us who are forgetful.
Absolutely. There's many uses for augmentations. When we talk about AI as an augmenter, it has lots of value. Whether it replaces us again, that's a different discussion. But yeah, I think we're on a good thing with brain-computer interfaces, and I think we really need to throw some more money at it to make it a reality.
Yeah, let's hope there's developments that are good and pressing so that we can revisit it in the future with updates. Now, it's been a big week in Australia because on the 10th of December, the Australian government implemented the world's first laws banning children under 16 from social media. The world is watching, and clinicians who are beset with the onslaught of social media caused or related anxiety in young people themselves, parents and teachers, they're all hoping this works. We're going to have further analysis on this in 2026, but on this theme, we thought we would end today's show with a shout out to the British Medical Journal's recent takedown of social media influencers, dodgy medical advice, and what governments and healthcare services and clinicians should be doing about it. Now, there's some really good examples of valuable patient influencers cited in the edition, but then there's also a lot of examples that are not so good, such as a patient influencer claiming mushroom tea cured his Crohn's disease, and he's made over £1 million in sales of this tea. The analysis by Austrian researcher Raphael Heiss mapped out the biases that drive this behaviour: lack of medical expertise, industry influence, commercial interests, of course, and ideology. Heiss and his co-authors propose coordinated action is required. So better regulation, and of course, in some jurisdictions, there's no regulation or minimal. So we need better regulation, stronger platform accountability, and strengthening public health and education to create a safer digital environment. Now, a friend of the pod, Tina Pernat, has penned the editorial of this edition. I think, George, that Tina wins the most commonly cited author on Pulse this year. But Tina and David Scales argue in their editorial that we can't just regulate this problem away. They say we need to recognise that the information environment as a determinant of health is a thing. Now, that's where people get their information and it shapes their health outcomes just like the physical environments do, and that clinicians need to engage with this information ecosystem that their patients live in. It's a topic we've discussed before on Pulse, and given the social media ban, I thought one that we should revisit today. What are your thoughts all on this topic, George? It's a big one.
It's a big topic, and like the social media ban's getting a lot of press, and it's interesting. I actually have a 13-year-old nephew who's quite concerned that he won't be able to watch YouTube videos about how to play games anymore. Let's be honest, even the concept of influencers. When I grew up, influencers were people like presidents of the United States and prime ministers and Albert Einstein.
People who had earned that status. So they've worked hard, they've got knowledge in their head, they're good at communicating that knowledge, so then they become an influencer.
Now, today's influencers probably don't meet most of those requirements and make a 2-minute video, wait for the adoration and the money to come pouring in. And to be honest, I'm not a big user of TikTok, I have to say. My kids are, and they've shown me a thing. That's the one. I had a look at it, and I can really find a much better way to spend my spare time rather than looking at all these videos. But they obviously have effect. Interestingly, the mushroom influencer, Australia's own mushroom influencer, has probably decreased the sales of mushrooms, but that's another issue. But if they're influencing you on how to make a good souffle or play a video game or even what to wear, I don't get too worked up about it. But when they tell you to drink unpasteurized milk, forego vaccinations, buy the magic powder to cure your cancer, those sort of things are an issue. And I think this article in BMJ actually did a really good job of highlighting what we need to think about. Because if the influencers use their power for good, which some do, let's be honest, not all influencers are bad. Some of them are out there providing public health education and providing information which is useful for people. They're the sort of things we need to support. But the article points out that there are 4 key biases that we need to take into account when we're looking at influencers, and especially when it comes to health: lack of medical expertise, industry influence, entrepreneurial interest, and ideological personal beliefs. If we have a way of discerning what those biases are in that influencer and how that's affecting what they're discussing in their talk or Instagram video, then that gives us a process to manage the use of those technologies. Now, how do you legislate that? That's really hard. These are global tools based anywhere around the world. So you really can't legislate, as Tina points out. This is an education problem. This is a problem where you need to educate people to understand when they're looking at these videos or things on Facebook, whatever they happen to be, understand what the goal of the people publishing them are, what it means to them. So they actually have a fighting chance of understanding what's trying to be sold to them, what they're trying to be influenced, and whether it's relevant to them, whether it's safe for them. And this is where abolishing public health unit, whose role it is to help educate the public about health and potential risk, is probably not the best way to go. Victoria?
Yeah, thanks, Victorian government. Yeah.
This is where we really need to have both digital literacy, health literacy, combine the two, help people understand how these tools are being misused. We do need to have some legislation. And like I said, banning their use totally is hard, managing, controlling. But then at the same time, do we want Australia to be behind a firewall which controls everything that comes in? So we have that balance of information and control of information. But I think a properly educated public who understands the risks associated with these sort of influencers and the ability to publicly call them out as required to these guys aren't doing the right thing, and here is the evidence, and the push for them to demonstrate the evidence of what they are doing is right. The fact that it's unregulated. The discussion we had with Eric Topol a few months ago, when he talked about if anyone is a longevity influencer and is trying to sell you something, they no longer should be considered a good influencer. These are the sort of things we need to think about.
Yeah. It was quoted in the BMJ piece that 70% of young adults, they follow health influencers, and 40% of them have actually bought something because of a health influencer. So I think that influence literacy, that idea of teaching all people, patients, but also clinicians, on how do you have visibility and understanding over those biases that these influencers have. But I think we'll be revisiting this topic again in 2026, not only because we'll talk about the social media ban and how that has been playing out in Australia, but it's something that the healthcare system just can't afford to ignore. I love Tina's work in terms of understanding, hey, this is the new reality we live in. If we think that we just need a shinier campaign or, just get our own person doing TikToks or something, it's just not good enough. She's got a lot of really important things to say that people need to pay attention to, because there'll come a time where there'll be entire generations who come into the doctor's clinic as a very last resort after they have got a whole bunch of information from influencers, from ChatGPT and other things. This is a significant change, and I think it's something that we really need to be paying attention to.
Look, as a podcast, we may well be considered by some people to be influencers, but one thing I think we've done as far as these 4 key biases are, we've demonstrated our medical expertise. We've demonstrated that we have no industry influence. We have no entrepreneurial interest. We haven't tried to sell you anything, possibly a subscription to Pulse IT. And from an ideological, personal belief, we're very open about our mindset. So I think we tick the 4 boxes of being good influencers. I think everyone else should follow that example.
Thanks, George. I think that's the end of our hot topics finally today. We've had a lot to discuss.
And only half of them were AI related.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. And George, when I look back through all these stories, a common theme throughout all of them is the importance of trust, whether we're talking about Scribes and what you can trust, being able to trust that your clinicians are using your information in a way that is not harmful to you, but actually helpful. And then the government infrastructure we need to support these things, as well as how we actually make innovation good for people and they're good for the ecosystem.
And a lot of trust relies on transparency.
It does.
And education. Back to education. A well-educated population is going to have a much better outcome. So,
absolutely, yes. And George, do you have any recommendations for the Pulse Potties today?
No, nothing specific other than as we're getting into the festive season, make sure you don't drink and drive and do all those sort of proper things, eat the right food. You can have a little bit of bad food over the Christmas, New Year period, and make sure your New Year's resolution is about improving your quality of life, and make sure you keep on listening to Pulse Pod, brought to you by Pulse IT.
All right. Well, something happened. I saw this video on YouTube and I was like, oh my God, I have to tell people. I know a lot of people like to think about the books they're going to read over their Christmas break. And if you're like me, you come up with a list of a bunch of them and you might get through 1 or 2. But anyway, so I have a book recommendation, which is a novel. It's been out for a few years now, but the book is called Project Hail Mary. It's written by Andy Weir, who did The Martian. And so that was probably his most popular book. I listened to the audiobook, which blew my mind. And so I've decided I'm going to go back and read the book with my own brain, not just listen to it. I'm just going to read the words. And the reason I wanted to recommend it, because it's like one of the best novels I have ever read. And next year in March, they've created a Project Hail Mary movie, and I'm sure it'll be incredibly popular. So my public service announcement to the Pulse Potties is, if you can, do not watch the YouTube trailer of the movie yet, because there's some spoilers that when they happen in the book, you're like, holy shit, what? Oh my God, blows your mind. And it's so enjoyable. And in the trailer, they've actually put spoilers in there. And so I wanted to recommend, if you're looking for a good novel, and you don't have to be a science fiction fan or anything, it is a science fiction book, but it's so much about the human spirit and drama, because it starts with somebody waking up and they have no memory of who they are and where they are, but they're all alone. And so there's this mystery. And then over time, this person gets flashbacks to who they are and what they're doing there. And then there's significant problems that they have to solve. So it's got mystery in there and discovery. It's just lovely. So the movie will be a huge hit because the key star is Ryan Gosling. George, please read this novel. I would listen to the audiobook, because the audiobook was fabulous. It was so good. I could not turn my headphones off. And yeah, but read the book before the film comes out, and I promise you won't regret it. So there's my recommendation.
That sounds good. So like you, I don't like trailers that give away plot. So whenever a trailer comes on TV, we always go to the movies 15 minutes late so we can miss all the trailers beforehand, because it ruins the movie for you. But yeah, The Martian was one of my favorite movies. And yeah, I'm a big space fan. And The Martian was probably the most accurate science fiction space movie for many years. There were a couple of little things that were out, but it's pretty good. So definitely that sounds like something I will do over the holidays.
I think you'll love it. Yeah, you'll love it. Okay. In the meantime, George, could you please read us out?
Thank you for listening to Pulse, brought to you by Pulse IT News. Pulse is produced by Ivan Jurek of Octopod Productions. Special thanks to Emily Mara for her support. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, follow, and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, you can visit pulseit.news to sign up for the e-newsletter and explore Pulse IT's massive digital archive. Send any feedback or topic suggestions to pulsepod@pulseit.news. We'd love to hear from what's on your mind.